To begin this lesson, we are going to learn from two quotes which we have taken from two men who are famed to be founders of two unique economic philosophies, which are capitalism and communism. So let us hear from what Adam Smith had to say. Adam Smith said, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest." Let us pause and hear what Karl Marx has to say. Karl Marx said, "The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles." So even though these two men represent two opposing economic philosophies, Adam Smith representing capitalism and also deemed to be the father of capitalism, and Karl Marx representing communism, which he also fathered, and we understanding how different these philosophies are, we can agree that on this particular point of human selfishness, Karl Marx and Adam Smith ate from the same plate. They have the same thing to say when it comes to man serving his or her own interests. From this, we want to answer the first question which we had from our objectives. So the first question from our objectives was, what is the primary objective of a business? What do you think is the primary objective of a business? So when we look at the primary objective of a business, what we are going to talk about, firstly, that's profit maximization. So the primary objective of a business is to maximize profits. The business aim is to charge prices which are as high as they can be, but without risking losing customers when they opt to buy from other stores or shops, or rather to substitute that particular good which a business is selling. So the primary objective is profit maximization. But when profit is maximized, who gets it? That's our second question. The reason to maximize profits, it is wealth creation. So people start businesses so that they can create wealth for themselves. And if the original owners of a business can no longer run it on themselves, they hire a management, be it directors and the hierarchy of those who are going to be managing the business. They are also going to get external funding from shareholders. So what becomes the primary objective of a business is actually increasing shareholder value. So if the value of a share or the value of a stock increases, that increases the wealth of the shareholders. In so doing, the wealth of the owners is also increased. So this is the primary objective of a business. And why did we start with Karl Marx and also Adam Smith? It is not from the benevolence of the butcher. It is not from the love, the kindness of a butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. So the owners of a business, they actually start a business to create wealth for themselves. But in that objective, we now have external benefits which are then rendered to the customers, maybe to the society, and also the community. Karl Marx, on the other hand, said the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. So according to Karl Marx, there is a struggle between the bourgeois and the proletariat, meaning the bourgeois, in self-seeking and also wanting to satisfy his or her own interests, will sometimes implement policy which is going to affect the worker. Let us now go to the second question. The second question was, can a business have other objectives? A business is there to serve the needs of the owner and shareholders, then it ends there, or a business can actually have other objectives. To answer this question, the question of other objectives, let us write it down. So we want to look at other objectives of a business. What are these other objectives of a business? Let us start off from what are called sustainable development goals, which were developed by the United Nations. So we have 17 sustainable development goals. You can do your research on this to understand them better. But as you can see, number 1, it's no poverty. That's an example. Look at number 4, which is talking about equality in education. And we can look at number 13, which is talking about climate action, etc. So businesses are beginning to adopt this list. Of course, they are not going to do everything on this list of 17, but they are going to pick 3 or 4 objectives which they are going to focus on so that their businesses can be sustainable. The ill of self-interest is that in the long run, the business will suffer. And by long run, we mean the end game of the business. It won't end well. For example, take a mining business, which is exploiting nature. They are extracting minerals from the ground, but in so doing, they are not implementing any ways of preserving the natural ecosystem of where they are doing their mining. They are also hostile towards the societies which are living around their own mines. Give that mine 5 to 10 years. Business won't be sustainable. So for the sake of sustainability, we are now beginning to see a shift of business where we have businesses concerned about the society or community. And how do they do this? There are implementations or initiatives which they can invest in, for example, scholarships, etc. So these are other things which businesses can do, other objectives of businesses. We can also talk about the environment. Businesses are beginning to be focused on the environment. They are beginning to move in a way which does away with carbon emitting sources of energy and going more towards green energy like solar energy and sometimes wind energy. We also see businesses, because of our liberal world and the liberalization of the workforce, that they are now beginning to focus more on employees. If you study the Western version of industrialization, where there were no laws which protected workers, and this is partly the reason of the coming up of the alternative theory of communism, where children were forced to work where the working conditions were dire, where people were working 14 to 16 hours per day. But because of modern civility and liberalization, we are now beginning to see a shift towards ensuring that workers, number one, earn a livable wage. Secondly, their working conditions are not inhumane. So there's something we have to discuss, which I think is important. So what happens is, when we look at a business, of course, it is going to have owners. And when a business grows to be too big, we see owners looking for alternative sources of funds. They begin to sell shares, so there is an incoming of shareholders. And the primary objective of a business is to create wealth for the owners and shareholders. But we are also beginning to see that businesses are forced to also look at other stakeholders. And by stakeholders, we are looking at other people who are affected by the business or the dealings, transactions of a business, even though they might not be part of that economic transaction. Let me borrow a certain aspect, but I'm not going to explain it because it is not part of accounting. In economics, they have what are called negative externalities. And a quick example of negative externalities, that's pollution. So if we have a mining company which is polluting the environment, it is affecting the society and community living around that mine. So the community forms part of these stakeholders. So the stakeholders which businesses are beginning to focus on, we have customers, of course. Businesses are taking it as part of their objectives so that they do not sell defective goods which can actually harm their customer base. We can talk about employees. We can also talk about the community and society around which a business is located. So apart from just focusing on creating wealth and increasing money for shareholders, businesses are also forced through legislation, through rules, through laws, and through the need to be sustainable to focus also on other stakeholders such as customers, employees, communities, and the like. This is what we wanted to discuss in this lesson. As you can see, we have covered question number 1. What is the primary objective of a business? We also have covered question number 2. Can a business have other objectives? In our next lesson, we are going to focus on number 3. Who cares whether a business achieves its primary objectives? Then number 4, who is the final user of financial reports? That is what we had for today. I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions or contributions, please post them in the comments section. If these lessons are doing you any good, may you please consider subscribing. Thank you.